Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk using LLMs to lower barriers to write apps. And I am Sri Ram Ramakrishna. Thanks for coming. Now, a quick introduction. And before I start, I wanted to give a shout out to the organizers of LOS, of which I'm also one. I just hope, wish that I was there in person, and I really feel bad that I'm presenting this conversation. This talk remotely, but unfortunately, circumstances led me to not able to come in person to get this talk, and I would have really enjoyed seeing all of you in person. So with that, I will continue my Who Am I. I am a GNOME contributor since 1997. This feels like a long time ago, and it was. In that time as a GNOME contributor, I did primarily community management, which interestingly enough led to a job in professional open source, where I now work for Intel Corporation, focused on developer relations and ecosystem building. And I have to thank the GNOME project for giving me the ability to have this ability to do developer relations. And it seems I've been doing that for all the whole time I've been at GNOME. So really appreciate that. Um, so the premise of this talk is to really explore LLMs and their code generations and what their limitations are and how we can leverage the LLMs today, right? And going through this talk, we're gonna see a bunch of stuff about my trials and tribulations, and there'll be some kind of conclusion. And I'm going to premise this talk as it's not going to be like we all should be using LLMs for coding, and that's not what I'm trying to say here. But it does lower the barriers, but it's very specific, right? So with that said, I'm going to first do some level setting on AI ML. I think most people are familiar with the terms LLM and SLM, for I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page and what all this is. And for those who haven't looked at it, or and so, but large language models and small language models, large language models is what you would are these AI models with really large training data sets and with what they call. You're going to find later that AI is all about statistics, right, and modeling and so forth. And so these LLMs are very large, so they have this idea of weights. I'm getting a little ahead of myself in these slides, but just to just bear with me. So the LLMs are like, if you're training an LLM, you're going to need like huge amount of video memory, and so you're going to put this on some kind of data center or something like that for training and fine tuning and so forth. The small language model is much more appropriate for running on a laptop or an edge device or a phone or something, right? If you have a Pixel, or like these tensor cores on pixels or whatever, right? An SLM is the best thing, and they're really small, and in fact, I usually focus on SLMs because I can use them processor, right? I don't actually have NVIDIA A100 cards sitting in my garage for me to do any AI type stuff, right? So SLM is a really great thing. So just a quick there, but what makes LLMs SLM? There's in that technology the real power, right? The real power is transformers, and transformers is this deep learning architecture, and it's it's that special sauce, right? That does the prompt. So it's this leap forward in technology that makes things like ChatGPT look really amazingly cool. So when I was a kid, like that kind of talking to a computer is some science fiction stuff, right? But now you can type in whole sentences and it figures out what you're talking about, and that power comes from transformers, and the entire idea of transformers is to take like a sentence and then convert them into a numerical representation. Everything in AI is math essentially, and it figures out what the association is, what the context is. It figures out what are the words in the sentence that are actionable and it needs to pay attention to. So that is the kind of thing that transformers do, and it came from Google. It was this paper they did, but that's the big leap forward, and why everybody's going crazy because of this natural language processing (NLPs) that you can do with computers now, right? It's nothing mysterious. So, but just to kind of underscore the point, we have this quick example, right? What is the color of a bark of a tree, right? And the transformer will convert those into a numerical representation called tokens. So it breaks them down into tokens. And then using a neural network, which is actually an LLM, right? That is the neural network. The transformer figures out which are the important words and then figures out the context and then calculates how to respond to it, right? It's not looking up a database or things like that, although there is something called RAG, where it actually is looking on the internet to kind of update it, right? Because training data is always historical, not necessarily in the present. And so here's a kind of a quick graph of visual of what a transformer is doing. And I'm focusing on transformers because transformers is sort of that thing that you can recognize as why something an AI will hallucinate or whatever, right? It's why it gets something wrong because it's calculating what it thinks it would be statistically. And but transformers is so this so you have this input, an encoder, an attention, and output. The decoder is actually some versions of LLMs will do different things. I'm doing a common one, but like for instance, GPT only uses decoders. And so the input would be some kind of sentence, and then the encoder is the one that transforms that into its vector representations, right? So it's all turned into mathematics, and then this attention thing. That's the thing that tries to figure out the relationship between the words. And it uses all the previous tokens it knows about to figure that out. And so where the LLM comes into this is that the LLM knows all the statistical weights through a neural network. And so it computes what it thinks the output is. So each word is statistically figured out, I think this is going to be this. And I have a high probability this is it. So that's why, it just requires more and more training data to make that statistical model more accurate over time. Now, this is my sort of knowledge that I know. I'm not an AI developer, of course, and so I'm not going to be going into a deep dive on this stuff. It's a very superficial knowledge on my part on how these things work. But I'm giving this out to you also that you have a kind of base start of what I'm talking about when we start talking about these problems that happens when you're using an LLM. And so going back to the 1M, there's of course many kinds of LLMs, and there's BERT, and of course everybody knows about the GPT ones. There's Bloom. In fact, there's so many of them. There seems to be like a new one coming out. There are even some that I think I saw Red Hat was talking about that is only using known data sets and not everything that could be a copyright violation. You know how these folks are, it's almost like a criminal enterprise trying to get as much data even with and without your permission. And I know those are troubling things going forward. But there are LLMs that are specific to coding. And there are a few here I put on the menu. Well, all of these graphics, by the way, is all generated on ChatGPT. It's one of kind of the nice things about I do find that I like about generative AI is that sometimes I just want some specific graphic or some specific things to do it, and it saves me a boatload of time trying to find clip art that is sort of there. I can just sort of imagine what it is and put it in there, and there's less chance. I mean, how hard is it to say, give me a menu that shows these 4 items, right, or something to that effect. But anyway, these coder LLMs are specifically trained on our stuff, right? Anything that's on GitHub, GitLab, Stack Overflow, you name it. If there's code there, they'll take it, right? Yeah, and all of this is trying to understand programming of all the various starts, every language, Python, C, Qt, all of that stuff, right? And essentially, it's code laundering, right? Because we have a license for our code, GPL, and these scrapers, which all of us are annoyed with, show up and they come in uninvited to our code repositories and just train themselves on it, and there's no giving back. It's a one-way thing. Right? They should give us money, right? But all those are under a license, and so now the code is public domain, so to speak, right? So there's the promise of open source is that the code is free, but we expect you to help pitch in and make it sustainable, and not make it just training for your business model. So I'm going to start with my adventures in code generation, and again I got a nice little generated graphic here, and I didn't use any of the coder LLMs. I used ChatGPT and the reason I didn't use the coder LLMs is that I don't have a A100 NVIDIA card with lots of GPU memory, and everything like that to sit there. So I use ChatGPT because I have a subscription, and it comes back reasonably quickly. There's a tokenization rate, right? You don't want 30 tokens a second where it looks like you're well, some of you may be too young to do this, but some of us who are at my age will remember being on a 24-baud modem and watching the text kind of scroll across the screen. That's the kind of speed we're talking about. Is some kind of flashback to the bad old days when your text speed on a computer was really slow. Anyway, I digress. So to do this talk, I got I got the idea for doing this talk because I wanted to write an app, and in generally I wanted to create this app that lets me do a conference agenda, right? And it's got stuff that I wanted to do. I want to show data in a row column, be able to do certain things like move the columns up and down, move columns across, that kind of stuff, right? And it's I do there, and why do I want to do a conference agenda is I do conferences professionally, and I guess I have to blame GNOME for that as well, since I started doing that in GNOME space with a few events, and including Linux App Summit, and now I'm doing that too professionally. So uh, it feels like whatever I start in one, it ends up in the other. But I did need a tool, and I thought this is a good tool that's sort of unique and isn't the usual patterns of what people tend to write in this space. It's something for that a lot of us who manage conferences can do. So anyway, I wanted to write this app, and I started writing in Python 3 on GTK4 because I even though I haven't touched GTK since GTK 2 days, in turn, I think the last thing I hacked was Rhythm Box. So that was quite some time ago, and I think I was doing it for a master's class. Anyway, uh, um, but the first step I wanted to do is, okay, how do I start? And I think this is the one great thing is when you're starting doing an app, a generative, and you don't quite know where to start. This prompt just saying create a sample GTK4 Python app using GTK column view. Of course, I had to pick the most complicated widget GTK4 probably has, and because of course I wanted a row column kind of thing, and it did do that. It did create a nice app that did it. And so you start with that, and then you start messing with it in terms of, hey, I want to do this thing or do this other thing, and you keep going through. And sometimes I'm not creating. I create the sample. I take that and I import. I don't import it. I just look at it and then write my own. And I also look at other sample code that people have written, and I sort of built the sort of beginnings of this app. But I wanted to add something, and sometimes I don't always know how to do it, and sometimes the docs are a little opaque for me. Uh, like I said, I haven't touched it in a while, um, so yeah, I went through this, and it was kind of incrementally able to add things to this app. Of course, it wasn't smooth sailing, right? There's plenty of times it gets it wrong, but uh, doing this iterative thing to kind of fix the app and add the things I wanted, I did run into a number of frustrating issues that I think people should be aware of. And the first one is that it sometimes gets confused between GTK4 and GTK3, and so it's not able to sometimes tell which one to use. Again, it's trying to find some kind of process in its head and what is the easiest path. And I found that very annoying. And then I have to tell it, hey, I don't think this is the right GTK version. Sometimes you can tell straight off, especially if you've coded a while. Next one, frequent hallucinations of API that doesn't exist. I've had it say, oh, you should use this and it should do this. And a really funny thing, especially in the latest ChatGPT, is how toxically um, positive it is about everything. It's screwing up left, right, and center, but it's like, yeah, this is great. And so every time, this is the final version. This is the final version. And then it's just doing case, keep saying the final version ad nauseum, right? But in the meantime, it's hallucinating APIs that doesn't exist. It's grabbing APIs from other widgets. So it's almost like it's determined to find the easiest thing it could do, because it's like, oh, I wish it was this, so I think I'll just use that. uh, so and sometimes if it's straight out, when it doesn't know, it just makes things up, right? And if you go back to the section of the talk where I was talking about level setting, right? This is all statistics, right? So if it can't find any context, it it goes down to the next tier. What could it possibly be? And that's where that garbage comes up, because it doesn't know. So then it just becomes a random sample. And this is the one that really got me. After a while of trying to get it to do this one thing, I kept correcting it and I kept correcting it, and then, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, try this, and then suddenly it was back at the beginning of when I first tried it. I'm like, I had come full circle. I could not believe that I had come full circle, right? And so I'm like, oh great, I'm on an infinite loop. And I'm never going to actually solve this problem with the prompts I was using. And so that started getting monotonous and not great. I'm not saying it was completely good or bad. I got somewhere, but I ran into some issues. And this is over a period of days, 2 days, whatever, and so I had some observations while I was doing this, different observations than the one I was talking before, and you can almost tell that there's a mindset of some sort, and so you actually need to figure out the right prompt to kind of coax the right answer. And this is where this prompt engineering comes in, is that you have to kind of understand what it's thinking. And so that's what is great about that one LLM called DeepSeek, because you can kind of see what its mind is, where his mind is going, and maybe it'll help you figure out what the prompt is. But it's almost always you have to make it think in a different direction, almost like you need to create a different entropy or different seed, random seed, so that it'll do something different. And so that's that. Um, and the other thing that was that it was asked. I was asking for something that there was no training sample for. So if you get into these corner cases where you're writing an app or you're writing something and you can't figure out, nobody's done it, right? You're trailblazing something, and unfortunately that was something I was doing that I had asked around, and nobody wasn't quite sure. I'm sure Matthias Clausen would know, but I haven't asked him actually. So, but I wasn't quite sure. So that was that. So in some case, you just going to have to figure it out. But the great thing was I got fairly far there without having to ask anybody, or and I only got into the LLM stage after exhausting discourse and various other things, right? But reading up on all of those helped me understand that when I was getting the wrong answer. Yeah, I had to put this as a bit of a troll because vibe programming is some kind of new thing that's happening in the AI space. And and if you ask what is vibe programming, it's this like notion that a non-programmer can completely write an application by just telling the LLM what to do. Now, I don't know how that actually works, because if you're a programmer or a non-programmer, how do you even tell it what to do, right? What's the whole premise? So, if it's all high level, write me a web app where it does this and this and this, I suppose that's one way of doing vibe programming. But I remember there was some funny video out there that was talking about, oh yeah, it was like a senior developer yelling at the computer trying to do vibe programming. But most people I've talked to who claim they did vibe programming said it didn't really go anywhere, and I don't think you can really create complex apps. There's some crazy, scary stories of, friends of our friends. I'm sure they're all lies. Where some guy created an application for his dentist office, and I'm just thinking, what kind of violations they did writing. I wouldn't trust an app, generated app that that for a dentist's office or a medical office. Like, what kind of protections for that data would there be? How would they even know? What would be the prompt for them to like check it, right? I'm sure it's some like breaking the law somewhere. You're gonna that's the wrong kind of vibe. But I didn't really finish the app. Sorry, because I ran into a problem because I couldn't find a way to implement this, and there was no training to implement it. So where I am right now is that I'm doing it the old-fashioned way, which is taking out a pad of paper and then understanding how the data models work and just sort of playing with it. And but it did give me some ideas on what may be some gaps when we're building apps in ecosystems. So, uh, but as far as I'm aware, what I was looking to do, there's no code out there. So how would an LLM know, right? And I'm going to skip this slide because I sort of went already what went wrong, but why did I not finish my app? It's really again just not being able to. I mean, it's if you want to know what I was trying to do, that and it got me in trouble was in GTK column view. There's if you think about it, the grid, like a spreadsheet, right? For those of you who may not be aware of GTK and any of its widgets. Um, what I want to do is put it in this grid with rows and columns, and then be able to move the rows up and down, drag and drop them. Same thing with the columns, and that's a complex task because you have to figure out how when you move, you have to move the data that's behind it and everything, right? It's probably more than people want to know, but that was what I was trying to do, and that's where I went wrong. And um, I learned a couple things from this adventure that I think is useful to relate, and I think some of them are probably obvious. I think, but I think it's it's good to call it out, right? And one of them is and I do it just from a strategic kind of view. Gen AI doesn't teach you everything, right? It doesn't know how to tell you how to start uh, writing that. And I think some of that is because it's not trained to think that way for our particular use case. I'm sure that if it was a full stack kind of web programming or something like that, where there's lots and lots of training data and lots of things on Stack Overflow that it would have been trained enough to understand it. But we don't have the same level of training materials, in my opinion, and so it gets harder, especially if the docs are more focused on from a platform perspective, right? Like the people writing them are more from looking at it from a platform and not necessarily from how an app person would look at it. I feel like there are two different points of views, and you can. And the other thing is, it feels like you would spend a lot of time wasting your time in this vibing kind of thing where you just keep on uh, where normally in software engineering you write code, you run the compiler, you get errors, you go back, that process of fixing and turning as you run and so forth. Instead you're doing it with an LLM that's coming out things. So you cut the output of the Python code and then you throw it on the on ChatGPT and it says, "Oh, I know what's going on," and it gives you the wrong answer again, and then And so it's a little worse because at least if you're when you're doing it in regular software engineering, you kind of know what you're doing. You kind of can go look somewhere. You could keep staring at it or ask a friend to look at it, and you know. But here you sort of didn't build a foundation in the first place, and so you're just throwing AI at it and hoping that there be some mechanism that will fix your problem with the right prompt. Uh, and also it just sort of creates a laziness. You stop thinking. It reminds me in the old days, for some of you, again, before the days of cell phones and Google Maps and whatnot, I had a pretty good idea where I'm going most of the time. And if not, and you build the instincts because you're forced to remember. But then, if once you do Google Maps, you just sort of follow what it tells you, right? And so you're not always situationally aware of things because Google Maps kind of removes that instinct because you're following it along. And I think it's sort of the same thing with programming is you don't think strategically. You're just trying to get past this error. Right? And I for me I just wanted to get those rudimentary functions fixed, and then from there I just want to get it as sort of a kickstart. But I don't expect to like continuously use Gen AI for the entire software development support process, right? That's not something you can do. But that process of going and sticking on there and going there really reminds me of this. I don't know if you've ever been to casinos anywhere, but in the U.S., if you go to a casino, there's always a stratum of people who will sit by the slot machine, and they're usually fairly older, and they just sort of sit there, and they're just their eyes are glazed and they're just staring at it and just putting coins and just putting this thing, and they're just waiting for this bell. I've actually saw this where they actually won and it's still just like, yeah, okay, and then they kept going. I was like, what does it take for them to be like suddenly excited? But this is what the feeling was when I was doing the AI. I was like, I was literally just, and it was, I don't know, it felt kind of a little sad actually. But I've sort of given a really negative view of it. And again, I did say I did make progress, so it's not all bad news. I think definitely there's some good things that are worth thinking about and talking about um, in this. And I would say that some of those good things is you do eventually get an idea of what you need to do over time. Probably because you're frustrated and you're trying to like where it is, but it is giving you ideas like, oh, okay, I need to do my G object this way. And oh, I didn't think like for me to do this, and it does give you those ideas. I think it's got trained enough that it can do that, at least from a G object GTK kind of view. I found that if you upload code, sample code you've seen that you don't quite understand, you don't know what it's doing, you could load it up to the LLM and then ask it questions, and that's usually good. So it's like if you had a big library of sample code, you could just upload them and then say, hey, tell me about this or tell me about that. And that's a great way to lower barriers for writing apps because you have somebody to explain to you. And not everybody's available, especially in our ecosystems where that expertise is sort of scarce, right? There's not a huge bunch of people who know all these things, right? So having that is a kind of a nice stopgap, but it's also frustrating for the experts because, especially they're doing it wrong, right? Somebody's like, no, that's not the way you should approach this problem at all, right? So there is definitely something to be said about that LLMs don't really care about maintainability, right? So, but still, um, having those things and being able to have it as a learning tool is great. And the other thing is that ChatGPT, they're learning more and more over time. I guess if you keep putting $250,000 and times the number of LLMs out there, you're going to improve. Of course, the hunger for training data is the big thing, right? And so that's why we're our websites are all being AI scraped. Everything is like this hunger for human knowledge is a thing, and so I think, but at some point, we have to figure out how to deal with the LLM or AI issue in our community because it's not going away. I think, right? But I kind of got ahead of myself. But I think the great ways to incorporating LLMs, I did talk about the sample code and so forth. But actually, making it help write docs is really pretty good too. And um, it's a it's a nice way to create training material as well. And of course, you have to edit it and make sure for accuracy. But you could make it say, tell me, write a training material for writing a very simple uh, app for this widget, right? That kind of thing. And uh, and also there's plenty of training materials. Like if we had more discussions on discourse or things like that. Essentially, what I'm saying, the more you create content for training material, which they're going to scrape anyway, the better it gets. Maybe more chatty it gets. So it's sort of an idea out there. So I'm going to wrap up here, and so to summarize, I think LMs have a role to play in writing apps and lowering the values for them, especially for newcomers. It gives them a great place to start. It eventually does become a great learning tool, especially when expertise is not readily available because resources are stretched. And so sometimes you can do this, but we have to be we have to be aware of inaccuracies in what they generate, and that may not be easy for the beginner. They might feel frustrated as well. So something to that, but I don't really think it's a. I think the idea of uploading them and asking it questions is better than expecting it to generate code that works. I think the expectations definitely do not meet the hype. But that said, that doesn't stop people jumping on this train and hearing outrageous stories about what LLMs are doing. Um, but I think we should embrace LLMs as a good way to teach people how to write apps or docs. I think there should be some method for that. Maybe that means we train on our own LLMs, or SLM, and train it so that and get people to say, don't use those, use this. This is accurate. We know, So there's some ideas out there, and one maybe you can attract an AI company sponsor to actually do that for us, right? Um, you know, that could be a possibility. But in the end, AI is going to be there, and it's not going to go away. And it's better to lead than to be cynical. And I think we're going to have to figure out how that works. And only by embracing it and um, teaching it our values, we'll be able to take advantage of it. The other thing I didn't mention in these slides is that there's a whole bunch of tools out there that does not code generation, but like I said, it's all pattern matching, right? And so there's a lot of things where you can do boilerplate code, right? So there's a lot of editors that can do coding and or even plugins. I think even Vim has one or Emacs or whatever, right? And I think definitely I know VS Code too, and I bet you can even port it to GNOME Builder or whatever is out there, right? So and in those cases, if you're doing a lot of boilerplate code, especially like if you're doing C and G object, there's a lot of boilerplate code that you would have to write. And this is probably a good way to explore those things, I think. So, but I generally I have used these ChatGPT's LLMs to do certain things, and in the future I plan to kind of look at how training works, especially on small LLMs to kind of do historical data on like the events I'm doing. I want to train them so that once I'm done, I can give it to other people and say, hey, here's all the information about our events or things like that. And you could even do it around code commits or or if you want to train, people give you money to do something, you could do it and they can spit out whatever they want on the work being done. There's ideas. It's just something to think about, especially around fundraising and so forth. So just throwing out some ideas out there. With that, I'm going to end my talk. Thanks for listening. Again, I'm sorry I'm not there to dinner, but hopefully I'm in the chat here and ready to answer any questions. And hopefully I didn't oversleep because it's supposed to be 6 a.m. When this talk starts, my time. But anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. If you want to reach out to me, here are my ways to contact me or connect with me or so forth. So thanks again. Thank you, Loss. I hope you have a wonderful Loss experience, and we do want to know how it went for all of us. So please let us know, and please thank the organizers. They've worked really hard on this conference. So all right. Thank you so much. Take care.